So let's jump in without further ado. So I'm Adrian, and what's my experience been with managing the stuff of a loved one? So I feel that I'm a little bit earlier in the overall journey, but recently we had some landmark news, and the decision's been made for my mum to move in with me. So
Yay.
my so today definitely exciting news. My husband and I definitely looking forward to having mum, really, really become part of our lives. But invariably, there's that question of, it's not just an individual who's going to be, part of our home and household, but her entire life. And that also involves, you know, maybe some duplication of furniture, certain habits that are underpinned by certain belongings. Does she really need to have so many, summer jackets when in the Pacific Northwest it's maybe a little bit colder? Does she need as many high-heeled shoes? Perhaps boots might be a little bit more practical. So I'm just trying to navigate that entire process while also being very respectful that these belongings hold significance to her. And I'm really excited to also kind of engage with Kirsten and Julia, who have sort of also been through this, and hear their perspectives around how they navigated this challenge. So that's just like my quick perspective on where I am.
Well, we know where you are, and we totally understand and respect that. And we're in it too. I'm at the middle. I'm going to call myself the middle. I'm in the middle juncture of the caregiving episode, and the decreasing the China. So my website and my podcast are Who Gets the China. And that was really born out of the madness that I was going through as I started to help my parents navigate all the stuff in their house, and as I tried to help my sister and I think about what's going to let them age in place the safest, the happiest, the healthiest, the longest. And once you start digging in, you discover there's just a myriad of stuff. And for us, a lot of it is china, housewares, fabric stash, photos, thousands of photos. And so I started off being very frustrated by this process. And through my experience podcasting and talking to a lot of experts, I've learned how to reframe it for myself. And I'm hoping tonight I can share some nuggets of wisdom for others who might benefit.
Well, I love that we're at the beginning, the middle, and I will say that I'm on the tail end in a hindsight location. So hi, everyone. Thanks for being here with us. I'm Julia Yarbough. My Substack is Keeping It Real Caregiving, and my website, which is sorely neglected right now. Actually, it's in work mode, but Keeping It Real Caregiving. Same as Kirsten, the whole concept was born out of being in the middle of caring for my elderly, now deceased mother, and learning as I went and figuring things out and thinking that I wanted to share my perspectives with others, because there is so much that comes at you that you aren't thinking about that just falls into your lap. And when it comes to the topic of belongings and stuff, I moved my mother from South Florida to live with me and my husband. Uh, and it was a challenging move, and there was a lot of stuff, and there was a lot of emotion attached to this stuff. Like you, Kirsten, thousands of pictures, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But that's my journey. And I will honestly say, for anybody who's in the middle of it right now, or you're about to enter into it, I hope that what I can add to the conversation tonight is a little bit of, again, that hindsight of being able to take yourself out of it just a little bit. Because honestly, it wasn't until it was all over for me that I was able to see it from a completely different perspective. I think I did 80% of it right, and 20% that I wish I could go back and change. So that's me.
Well, we look forward to learning from you for sure. Because I think, we all can improve along the journey. And I'll say something that was revolutionary for me. And I think, Adrian, maybe this is like for you thinking about where you are, is prioritizing the connection with your loved one over just getting rid of stuff. I launched into this really with a mindset of, oh my gosh, this is totally overwhelming. We have bins of Smurfs, bins of Cabbage Patch Kids, bins. And I really was like, oh, we can surely let some of this stuff go. And after some frustrating episodes where that wasn't happening, I had to pivot and realize these are opportunities to connect with my mom and my sister and my dad over what some of these objects mean to them. And I have a podcast episode and a funny story about my mom's crystal, which I would love to have someday. And I always thought there was a particular history behind it. And when I finally busted it out one Christmas Eve, I realized my story was totally different than what actually happened. And they relayed this story about how they had this big fancy dinner party one night when they were first married, and my dad was reaching to put the plates away after dinner, and he dropped the plates all over their Waterford crystal that they got for their wedding, and it shattered into thousands of tiny pieces. And, at the moment, of course, no one was laughing, but they replaced it. And it became this funny story about their life in New York City and the way that they lived when they were newlyweds, and really just this funny recounting of it. And that's worth, to me, more than all the crystal in the cupboard, that glimpse into their past together. So I encourage you, as you embark on it, dig in for the stories and the connection first, and then the rest will follow.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I would definitely second that. And this is for you, Adrian, and anybody else out there who's entering into this, is that it can be, if we're taking on the role of family caregiver and we're looking at it from, high above looking down, we want to do all those logistical things. We want to get everything in place. We want to have all the items handled. We want to streamline. Why can't we just get rid of this stuff? I would encourage everyone to, right off the bat, even though we titled, we're talking about stuff. Even when you discuss it with your loved one, try to refrain from calling their personal possessions that are a lifetime of who they are stuff, right? When you think of stuff, it could be an old bike in the garage. That's stuff. But if it's the china or the shoes, and the winter boots, each pair of those boots may hold a story for your mom of where she bought them, of what outfit she wore them with. And so they might not just be boots. They might be a memory of a moment in time that has been important to her. And it's a hard thing to think about mentally, because we're looking at it going, oh my gosh, I have so much to move, and where is this going to fit, and how is it going to happen in my world? But if we step back and, as you said, Kirsten, look at those items and go, is there a story within this item or items? Is that a moment that I could find out what the story is as a way to then back into it of perhaps we could let it go? And if it's something that is so close to our loved one's heart, maybe we then have to say, do we leave it in a box? Do we put it in storage? To us, it seems silly. But if it's part of who they are, we may want to consider, how can we make sure that they're okay with their items, if that makes sense.
Yes,
So,
I mean,
Adrian, where are you
absolutely.
going to start? You're moving somebody across the ocean, your mom.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that. What are you thinking you're going to start with? How are you going to tackle this major event?
Sure. I mean, it's sort of been in the works for a while, for a couple of years, actually. And so the gears have definitely been kind of turning in my head. And, my mum definitely has a number of possessions that she really does just want to hold on to. And, in particular, there are some items of furniture, two Italian leather chairs that she got 20 plus years ago, which are absolutely gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. And I know that it's important to her. It's important to our family, because, we had them when we were all kind of living together before we kind of, before I traveled and went elsewhere. And so for me, it's it's not just also been that connection that she has with it, but more broadly, our family's connection with those two chairs, that I've kind of prioritized finding a place for it in our home. And in as much that, oh, my mom's moving in with me. It's very much, another individual with her entire life and her entire, being, and individuality is going to, be part of our household, be part of this family. And that involves also kind of bringing in her own routines, her own furniture, her own possessions as part of that. There's actually it took a little bit more work, but there's a large couch that she's really, really loved. Not had the chance to spend a lot of time actually using it because she lives in a small apartment now. But again, I've been like, you know what? This is important to her. I'm going to prioritize finding a space for her, whether it is a nook or in the basement, a place where it can be used, where she can go and enjoy it in the same way that she wanted to have enjoyed it in other guises. But having said that, I open her closet and I see, oh my gosh, how many clothes do you have? I'm afraid we're going to have to make some rational choices because, subtropical Asia is very different to the Pacific Northwest. So we're going to have to make some choices there. And I think that this is where, I mean, Kirsten, you'd also mentioned it, how do you go about, starting that conversation about permission and context and trying to maybe kind of reframe also, how they view their belongings and how it fits into this perhaps new life that they're going to live with you or live in this other place. How did you go about tackling
Yeah, I
that?
mean, the chairs really speak to me. And I was talking to somebody the other day and they were reminding us like it's important to give your parent the things that they have that connection to that will make them feel
Mhm.
comfortable. So even if they don't maybe fit in your space, making that space for them is showing you're welcoming them, you're appreciating them, you value them, you want them to be comfortable. But the one thing that jumps out at me that was a really good reframe for me many months ago, I worked with a consultant who works with family estates, and she said, you need to flip the conversation. You need a complete reframe. It's not about, and Julia, you were alluding to this, it's not about what are we getting rid of. It's about what matters, what do we need to keep.
Mhm.
Let's go through, let's figure out what are the things that really matter. Let's start there. And that builds confidence, it builds the muscle, it builds the trust. They know that you understand some things are just going to be important and there might not be a reason, right? It doesn't matter what the reason is, but by starting from a place of what do you want to keep, it reassures them you're not just trying to get rid of all their stuff, and it just shows respect for them and their connection to their things. And so I think thinking about it for that way for me really helped. We're not getting rid of stuff, we're keeping valuable things that matter to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that idea of merging your households. So our situation was quite unique, in fact, because um, I moved from South Florida to Northern California. Uh, so mom had her home, I had my home, and my now husband was moving from Southern California. So we were merging 3 households into one, right? Which is kind of crazy.
That's a lot.
Did it. And, not as funny as the China story, but once we got to the place where I had in-home care for mom, I remember one time one of our amazing ladies, she opened the silverware drawer and she's looking at it and she has this confused look on her face. And I said, "I know you're probably wondering why there are 3 different sets of silverware in there." And and she said, "Well, I was kind of wondering." I said, "Well, it's because we merged 3 households and mom likes her silverware, right? I like the handles on mine, so mine are on this side of the drawer, and my husband likes the ones he had, right? So does that make any kind of sense? No, but it did make sense because
Right.
it allowed my mother to have her items, right? So same thing, her pots and pans. Did we ever really use them? No. But if there's anybody out there who remembers Presto Pride, that was a big seller back in the day, and mom had the entire set. We could not give those up. I think we used them once she moved in with me.
Hey, but they're probably vintage. They're probably worth
Yeah,
something.
yeah, and I'm later on and thought, "Ooh, I'm gonna get something for these," and they were like $50, whatever. But it was such a difference for her, and so I would encourage anybody and many of us are gonna move into this, and, as you said, Kirsten, and the experts you've talked with is try to have those conversations of not only what are the items, what does it mean to you, right? So that we can understand what these items are. And then just one final thing, my mother loved elephants. So she had all kinds of elephant figurines. Not my thing, but that's okay. Our mantle above the fireplace was covered. That's where we put all of her elephants. So that the home was her home also. I always wanted her to know that this wasn't you moving in with us. This is our home. And I always framed it that way. So some of it's the language also,
Mhm.
that it's our space. And then
Mhm.
we matched the items. And I will say that there were 52 boxes that I packed from South Florida. 52, everybody, 52 moved from South Florida to California. And I would say that probably 12 of them were unpacked and incorporated. The rest stayed in the garage for 6 years in those boxes and then ultimately burned up in the wildfire.
Oh,
But she had her stuff with her and
yeah.
she knew it was there and it made her comfortable. So in the moment, it was a headache and a nightmare. But in retrospect, I'm so glad that I was able to do that because she knew that she had it there.
Mhm.
And that was the most important.
Yeah.
Another piece of advice kind of related to that I love from a therapist actually that I work with, and she was talking about kind of Adrian what you were saying about asking permission, right? So it's, are you ready to go through the kitchen cabinets right now, Mom? Is that something you feel like you want to do? And maybe the response in that moment might be, no, I can't do that. That's just too stressful. I'm not ready for that.
Mhm.
And then coming back later with like, okay, well, let's make a plan. Could we maybe do that in a couple weeks? Would you be ready to do that in 2 weeks? Does that give you time to sort of think about what things you love? And so asking permission and then setting a plan for action in the future. So it takes that anxiety away from that moment of
Right.
like, my mom calls her friend and like, oh my God, Kirsten's here. She's doing the Swedish death cleaning again with me. And that's not what I want. Right. So I've had to say, okay, let's just talk about it and then let's make a plan. And you know what? You might still be moving 52 boxes, but it helps you prioritize. And like Adrian, for you, I mean, you've got to get stuff across the ocean, right? So it's probably
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah.
So asking your mom, like, okay, if you're not ready to go through this right now, like, can we do it before you move? Or is that something that's got to come with? Or how are we going to navigate that together?
Sure. And I mean, doing things certainly with intentionality. I mean, it's interesting because you were talking about your 3 sets of silverware. Um, I'm a little bit similar, but with bowls. Of all things. I've like my set for cereal bowls. I've like Japanese style rice bowls. I have Chinese style rice bowls. I have like large noodle bowls, and so does my mom. But they're also important to us. And in as much that she asked me, conversely, it's like it was a two-way conversation. She was like, "Oh, Adrian, you could just use my bowls," and I was like, "Mom, I acknowledge that you've collected these bowls over so many decades, and you've had the chance to enjoy them. But I also want the chance to express my own preferences and styles and get my own bowls. But it's okay, we can combine them, and we're just gonna be eating lots of noodles and lots of rice and lots of cereal." But that's also kind of made me wonder about, Adrian, do you maybe have some hoarding tendencies that you need to address?
And the fact that you said that, and I was wanted to mention this too for folks that hoarding disorder is a real disorder. It's not just the television show that we watch. It's a real disorder, and research shows that as we age, an individual who has a tendency towards hoarding or collecting items, that it can be exasperated as they get older. Right. So if you are in a situation where you're thinking, okay, I have to help my loved one downsize, and you look around their space and you see clutter or what you think is just stuff, also be very aware. Is it somebody who just has a lot of possessions, or is there something underlying that could be leading to that? It's important to just be aware because you very well could downsize most of what they have, move them in with you, start to incorporate into the world, and you may discover that their living space, whether it's a room or half the house or whatever, slowly turns right back into what you just downsized from. They will find a way to create that same space. So be very aware when you're having those conversations with your loved one. And as you said, Kirsten, ask those questions. Why does this, what does this item mean to you? And that can help you determine if this is something that's more than just collecting stuff because they like to shop, or if it's something emotional that's going on below the surface. And it's just important to stay aware of that. You're on mute,
You see on
Kirsten.
mute. Oh,
I was just going to say it's a symbol of cognitive decline too, right? It may or might not be a hoarding situation, but you may be at a place where executive function is starting to falter, or you're just not thinking clearly, or you become overly emotionally attached to things. And so I think something that I also learned is, as the caregiver, watch out and listen and look and see, like, is this a sign that there's something else going on? Is this the behavior atypical of your parent? Like in my case, my mom has loved to save stuff for a really long time, so it's not atypical. But for somebody who's changing and all of a sudden really gripping tightly to scraps of paper, twist ties, things like that, it can be a sign there's other things going on. And so getting that cognitive assessment is often useful for that.
Yeah. In looking back, I don't think there are any easy answers. Somebody who's looking for a quick fix, easy breezy, I don't really think that exists. And it's different for each family because the dynamics are different. The individual that you may be, your loved one, everyone's different. I will say this, use these moments as much as you can to find those connections with your loved one, whether it's sorting through their items and then asking questions. You may ask, well, where did this trinket come from? And you hear a story that you never heard before from your loved one. And you go, man, I never knew you did that, or you had that experience, right? And that may even be a way to help them let go of some of that because now they've shared the story. It's not just their item and their memory. And to anybody who has photos, you mentioned thousands of photos, Kirsten, and this is really big for me. Take the time, make the time to sift through some of those photos with your loved one, because that's where the stories are at. That's where the connections are at, and digitize those photos. I think I mentioned this in our first session. For those of you who may or may not know, water under the bridge now, but I was a wildfire victim, and I had not digitized all of my photos. That's the one thing that rips me up to this day, that I didn't digitize photos. Take the time to do that. Do it with your loved one. Ask them questions. Who are these people? Where were you at in this picture? Turn that into an opportunity to connect. But please digitize your photos. Don't be me and then lose them.
yeah. I mean, to that, it's like, I also wonder, Kirsten, you'd mentioned using like Post-it to kind of see is something really kind of being used, accessed in the way that initially envisaged. And you'd also mentioned donations. I'm wondering, is there perhaps a way to think about sort of, there's a way to kind of sunset belongings of, hey, let's take those, let's digitize photos, or maybe let's use this kind of set of China ware for the last time before we potentially donate it, and kind of use that as almost like a ritual to kind of go through the process. Because we will at some point need to kind of go through and downsize stuff. There's no getting away from it. I'm just wondering if there's like a way to do it in a respectful, intentional manner.
I mean, you're bringing a story to mind for me about a dollhouse that my mom made for my sister and I. And it's large, and there's lots of furniture that goes with it. And it's sitting in the middle of the guest room closet where I might like to hang some clothes when I go visit. But we did kind of what you're saying together, the three of us, and we made this sort of ritual of, let's clean the dollhouse, let's go through all the toys, let's figure out what we want to do with it, because we found a place in San Diego that was a dollhouse store that would take the dollhouse and resell it. And so making it this kind of fun mother-daughter ritual of like, oh, remember we loved this Christmas tree so much, and then feeling good about where we could give the donation, because I know for my mom in particular, she wants to feel like her cherished items are going somewhere where someone will appreciate them. And I understand that too. I think, we all have some of that. And so figuring out, like you said, Adrian, okay, what's the ritual going to be and where are we going to gift this item so that the next recipient will perhaps value it somewhat. I think that's eased it for my mom a lot, right? Knowing the story behind who's getting it. And honestly, Buy Nothing, just a plug for Buy Nothing if you've never used it. I'd never used Buy Nothing, but like it's kind of cool. You get to meet the person that's taking your item. And a lot of times it's like a kid who's going to play with the doll. And like you just have a warm fuzzy about it rather than like dropping it at the curb. So that's my little plug. If you've got somebody that's struggling to let go, that's a good tool in your toolbox.
That's
It's a
awesome.
good piece of advice, and true, so true about finding a suitable donation location. That was big with my mom. To think of just donating, she had a hard time with that. Her feeling was, I worked really hard my whole life to have all of these things that I have. I'm not going to just give them to somebody. But then I made sure that I said, okay, well, what if we find a very particular outlet, a women's shelter that was helping women get back on their feet after, abusive situations. That resonated with her. And then she was okay as we downsized clothing, right? And other household items. And I could tell it made her feel better knowing that it was going to something that she believed in. And, you know, anybody out there, if you think or feel that you may be in this situation in the next couple of years, start doing some homework early. Just, find out what donation centers you have in your area, just so you're already prepared. Read up on what agencies come and take things, so that you have some sense, and start asking those questions of your loved ones early. Not what are we going to do with your stuff, but that chair that you've had, where'd you get that chair? What are you thinking about? Right? Start paving the way earlier. And the comment Dad thought I was stealing from him, every family's different. You have to have those conversations. And depending on what you hear back from your loved one, reframe your answers. I don't know if that made sense or not, the way I said that. But it's so unique for each individual.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. And at some point you cross over into that place, like if your father thinks you're stealing from him, there's likely some cognitive decline going on. And so kind of to your point, Julia, I mean, we never know when the storm is going to hit, and it's never too early to start working on getting things sorted out. One of the people that I've spoken with a bunch about this talks about the power of the yellow sticky note, right? So there's lots of ways you can deploy the yellow sticky note, but using it even to put like on the back of picture frames or artwork. And, if it's like, hey, I love this painting, Mom, that you got on a trip, just you put a yellow sticky note on the back, and it's a reminder later, for somebody else or for them not to get rid of it when maybe they're not realizing. And also it's a way for them to know that you're excited about that item, you appreciate that item, you're looking forward to cherishing that item yourself. So yeah, we've put yellow sticky notes to very good use in lots of different ways as our journey has progressed.
Sounds like maybe there's an episode that we can dedicate to that. I'm curious, like all the
I
different
think we could.
uses.
I have lots of good tips and tricks for how to use the yellow sticky notes. So, and then you need multiple colors of sticky notes because they serve different purposes. But
I
use
love
the tools that you have. Yeah, somebody told me a piece of advice as far as photos go to come up with a craft table. Use blue painter's tape to divide it into segments, and you can have, your high school photos, your kids' photos, your wedding photos, and it gives you a sense of what you have in all the eras of your life. And then you can kind of go through and prioritize, like, how many high school pictures do I really need? Probably a couple, but historic photos from my parents and my grandparents and my great grandparents, those are legacy items. And so you want to spend a little more time thinking about them and determining Like, how am I going to preserve them, Julia, to your point? Start scanning those first, maybe, because those are the most important for you, depending on what it is for you. But yeah, using some household items to help you sort and organize, 100%.
Yeah. And the one other thing that I would encourage everybody to think about too is, again, when we're looking at it from the outside of our loved ones' stuff, their items, their belongings, I would say try to put yourself back into your moment of being a child. Like, especially if there is an item that you remember from way back when you were a kid and it's still in play, put yourself back to that position and ask yourself, what does this item mean to me? So it's no longer about your loved one. What does this item mean to me? And how might I feel if this item all of a sudden was gone? And when you ask yourself that question, you might be surprised at what type of reaction you have. Um, because all of a sudden it shifts. And you may then have a memory of sitting in one of those chairs with your mom, Adrian, and you go, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. And that made me feel so whatever that day when I was sitting there with mom. You know what? We have to keep this couch. Totally different planning now of how you get it here to the States.
Right.
Help you think about how you start to identify how you go through everything. What does it mean to you and your mom?
Yeah. It's very much kind of putting up the mirror to yourself and being like, how would I feel if I was, you know, having these questions that are directed at me and trying to kind of flip the script a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I know we said we'd do 30 tonight, so I don't want to go over people's time. But real quick, I see and hear Mark said, Dad had everything I gave him as a kid. I experienced that as well. And again, my perspective now is on the tail end after, mom passed. And then, of course, I had all of these boxes and things to still go through. I had the most difficult time going through it. I thought it would be a breeze. Took me months because I would find
Mhm.
myself literally breaking down, crying, getting very emotional, having memories of things that had long since passed. And I realized that my mom had every single newspaper clipping of myself and my siblings, every article ever written, every videotape ever that I had ever done on air, um, every card that all of her children had sent her, everything. And I thought, oh my goodness, I would have never known this had I not taken the time to go through every single item that she had. And had I insisted that we get rid of her stuff, I would have never known that. So these are really individual moments. There are no easy answers, but always ask yourself, how will you feel if you decide to downsize, thin out, and you never really know what's down in those boxes?
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that's a lovely note to end today's episode on. Again, thank you very much, Julia. Thank you so much, Kirsten. I hope everyone enjoyed this. I really, really enjoyed our talks. Absolutely. And today's definitely very touching and feels very, very relevant and very prescient. So thank you so much for sharing your stories and giving me, plenty of food to, food to think about.
And just find a good moving company, start
Yeah,
researching,
I know, absolutely.
researching now, and pack as much as you can yourself. That saves on the cost. So those are all the logistical things that you have to start thinking about.
Yeah, I'm going over
Thanks.
in March, and I'm bringing big suitcases.
Yeah. Well,
May
we
as
want
well,
an
right?
update. We want some pictures and an update to see how
Oh,
the sorting and the packing to get things shipped across the Pacific Ocean works out. So thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and we look forward to our next live chat.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good luck with everything, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Take care. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.